Good morning, members, on this very sunny and delightful day. So hopefully we have a very good member. Welcome to this meeting of Tackling Poverty, Inequalities and Housing Subcommittee. The meeting has been live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, and we're all very familiar with that, and I think everybody knows the process, so I won't read that through. Especially for members in the room, could you speak clearly into the microphone, because sometimes it's difficult to pick up what you're saying, and it's important that your voice is heard. So thank you very much. Item 1 on the agenda is Sererant apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Nick?
Thanks, Chair. We have 6 members present in the hall. We have 8 members present on Teams, those being Councillors Blake, Drysdale, Jameson, Malcolm Johnston, Lowe, McFarlane, Marshall and Wilson. We have 1 member not present at the start of the meeting, being Councillor Ian Crothers. Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
Nick. I approve members' remote participation. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest or a statement of connection which they would like to make? Not seen anybody here or online. So we'll move on to the minute of the previous meeting. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, Chair, it's just a statement of connection with Anna New Start Recycle as a volunteer.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. It's a very important organisation for the Annandale South area and beyond. So we note your statement of connection. On to the minutes of previous meeting. These are for approval as a true record of the meeting of the 13th March 2025. We're happy to approve these minutes. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. 4, we're lucky enough to have here the representative of the Fishing Galloway Citizens Advice Service, and we're considering a report by the Head of Thriving Communities. This report requests that members agree to receive a presentation from our partner organisation who leads on our Council Information and Advice Services Commission. This commission is led by the Fishing Galloway Citizens Advice Service, and they play a crucial role alongside our Council to deliver on our partnership approach to tackling poverty and inequality. Are we all happy to receive this report from Phil Stewart and his team? Absolutely. Okay, thank you. So I'll hand over to Mark Malloy, the Service Manager, and Wendy Jessen, the Poverty and Inequalities Development Officer, who are here to assist members of any question alongside representatives of Citizens Advice and attendance. I'll hand over to Mark to introduce the presentation and our guests here. And following the presentation, I'll open the debate up to members after that. Mark.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. This report in front of you today continues the approach this committee's taken to receiving presentations from some of our key partners within Dumfries and Galloway, and to raise awareness with members around a number of issues. Citizen Advice Service are a critical partner to the delivery of our Council's work to tackle poverty and inequalities, and they're a hugely credible organisation within our region for the work they're doing with some of our most vulnerable citizens. And this report has a lot more detail than our previous reports regarding receiving a presentation, because alongside the good work they do, our council funds the organisation through a commission to deliver a range of information and advice services which complements our own teams within the council. So today we're joined by Marcella Craig, who is chair of the Citizens Advice Board, by Phil Stewart, who's their Chief Executive of Citizens Advice, and Christine Sinclair, who's the Operations Manager. And we'll hand over to them just now to do the presentation, as we've done previously, and then open up for questions from members for our partner organisation within Citizens Advice. So I'll now hand over to Phil Stewart.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Chair, many thanks for the opportunity to come along and speak to you, and many thanks for that introduction from Mark. It's a great opportunity to showcase the work of DAGCAS and to answer any questions that you may have for us, so very much appreciated. So rather than just listen to my voice for the entire presentation, we'll do it 3 ways. Christine will give you an overview of our current performance. So looking backwards, I'll talk about our environmental scanning and what's coming over the hill and the things that will impact. And Marcely will talk about, from a strategic point of view, our vision and ambition and what we need and what we want to do going forward. So really, without further ado, can I ask Christine to cover our performance?
Good morning, everyone. As Phil says, I'm going to cover the sort of performance of the organisation, and it's not just about the AIS Commission, it's also about the whole service that we actually provide. So I've got some key headline figures for you. The figures in this period are the ones in our most recent annual report, and they demonstrate just how many people we're helping in a year, and not just the actual targeted KPIs that are for income maximisation and debt that are shown within the AIS Commission. And another thing it also shows is that a lot of these people that come to us, they don't just need one contact with our advisors. It takes several contacts to resolve their issues, and also they don't just come to us with one issue either. They may, in some cases, seek assistance on one key issue, but because of the holistic approach that our advisors take, and with sort of additional sort of chatting with the clients, we're able to actually identify and then address a whole multiple areas of help, of issues that they have. And one of the figures we've put up there is the sort of client financial gain that we achieve for clients during the year. Now, that's not just money going back into the pockets of individuals, it's also money going into the local economy in Dumfries and Galway, because much of that money is actually spent in your local shops, and it's paying for services in Dumfries and Galway, so it has a bigger impact than just for the individual clients. During the period, we assisted 664 clients with £7.5 million of debt. So this shows that debt is still a big issue. It continues to impact on people every day. And one of the things that might be of interest to you, it's not just about people using credit cards or taking out loans. There's actually 25% of the clients that come to us are struggling to pay their council tax. 32% are struggling to heat and light their house, and 12% are in arrears with rent. So that shows that it's not just, the debt isn't just about people taking on loans and credit cards. And as these stats show, we're able to help a lot of clients, but the downside for people is that the demand for services very much exceeds our capacity. And although clients are triaged as quickly as possible when they make initial contact with us, and any emergency situations are dealt with, or issues that have a time-sensitive matter, it can take up to 2 weeks to receive the full advice that they need. So there's a lot more people that are needing our services than we're actually able to deal with at the moment. But one of the things we are constantly looking at is different ways to deliver our services, including directing clients to self-help, where they're only needing a bit of guidance for us and are then able to resolve their problems themselves. But there are many vulnerable clients in the region who are unable to address their issues without a substantial amount of advice and assistance from ourselves. And that's where we try to focus our help, because there is this demand that's above the capacity. We focus on these particularly vulnerable ones. And I would like to give you a couple of examples of how we actually make a difference for individual clients, because that's the other thing. Stats give you numbers, but it's what's really making the difference for individuals. So the first example here, it was a client that came to us with various physical and mental health issues. She'd applied for adult disability payment. She'd actually completed the application herself and had been rejected. So she was wanting help to request a redetermination of the decision. So the advisor discussed the client's issues and discovered that she'd suffered domestic abuse and she'd not detailed all of her issues on the application or sort of the impact on her daily life. The advisor assisted the client to articulate her situation and explain how this made a daily living tasks difficult. The outcome of it was the client was awarded adult disability payment at the enhanced daily living and enhanced mobility rate. So that's £184.30 per week additional income for that individual, or £9,583 a year. And I think this situation clearly demonstrates the difference that an advisor with the experience of the benefit system can make to a client's claim. Because one thing I would add is that we don't tell the client what to actually say. It is about, it's what they're trying to articulate, and that's where people do struggle, is trying to articulate their situation. And so the second example here is joint homeowners who were signposted to us by their bank because they tried to obtain a consolidation loan to pay off other debts and they'd been rejected for that. The advisor assisted the client to complete an income and expenditure statement to establish how much they could reasonably afford to repay their debts. And by providing the client with advice about their options and assist them to apply to repay their debts through the debt arrangement scheme at a sustainable monthly amount, they'll actually be debt-free within 3 years. And although there's no direct financial gain in this situation, the debt arrangement scheme does freeze interest and charges, so the debt levels aren't continuing to snowball. But there's also other things that's important in this case, is that because they're repaying their debts at an affordable rate, they're not at risk of being taken to court for their debt, which could ultimately lead to bankruptcy and lose their house. So it means that they're keeping a roof over their head and it relieves their stress as well. To finish up, I would just like to give you a few feedback comments that we've had from clients, because we do survey our clients and ask for feedback. And just a few of the comments I've had is, I would never have been able to have dealt with the situation I was in without your help. I didn't have a clue until I spoke to the advisor and they explained everything in a way I understood. I've never been in a situation like this before and was so embarrassed. And that's a common thing that we find with people, that they are embarrassed about the situation. And the final one, very grateful for all the help. It has given me peace of mind. So I'll just hand over to Phil now.
Our environmental scan and what's coming over the hill towards us. Really, I just want to touch on some of the things that Christine spoke about, about the value of our commission and the work that we've done round about how much that generates, not just the £9.9 million in client financial gains, but when you look at those financial gains, the free hours that we get from our volunteers, our income generated through the national projects, the value of the debt that we deal with, and the wages that we as a charity spend in the region, is that for every pound that we get from the AIS Commission, is that we'll generate, or we reckon we generate about £22 back into the local economy. And what that doesn't really cover is that's really the pounds, shillings and pence, but what that doesn't really cover is the quality of life issues and the savings that are there for the statutory authorities, so the NHS and the local authority themselves, is that Citizens Advice Scotland, they've worked out that for every pound that we get in funding, is that we will save the statutory authorities about £23 in intervention costs. It's there. So really what I'm trying to illustrate there is that in the quantitative as well as the qualitative aspects of this, is that you're looking for every pound that the IS Commission provides us, it generates about £45 in value to the region. It's there. And really moving on to what's coming over the hill towards us. This is just a snapshot, just to make sure that I kept it on one slide. And I don't intend going through absolutely everything that's there. If you want to touch on any of the specifics in that, please feel free to ask me after this presentation, and happy to do so. Is that those are some of the impacts that we've noted. And it's unlikely that any of this will come as a surprise to yourselves. It is there. This is already very well known, but what I wanted to do was just illustrate the impact that this has, and especially not just those that are out of work, but those that are in work as well, the impact that it's having on them. And I would suggest that there's a perfect storm is brewing here for our region. Many more people of all ages and work groups will be pulled into debt in the poverty trap. And these people will need the right support at the right time in the right way. And Marcely will cover that just very shortly. And it's not just Dumfries and Galloway Citizens Advice Service, but we recognise that it takes more than us. We're a player in it. I would say that we're an exemplar organisation in that side of things, but we are just part of that big partnership that has to develop to ensure that we're addressing poverty. A wee example of that for myself to demonstrate the journey that we're on and the journey that those across our region are on at the same time is when I joined Dumfries and Galloway Citizens Advice Service in 2018 as the Volunteer Development Officer. I sat in an interview. I knew very little about it. I thought it would be a great wee job to do me for a few years. And I sat in an interview with a client. It was there, and it was a lady that was much about the same age as myself. Her and her husband stayed in social housing. They had no car. He wasn't working because of issues. This lady had a wee part-time cleaning job and a wee injury pension that gave her a wee bit of money. And she came into the bureau and asked if we would give her a hand to contact the council to see if she could pay back our council tax arrears at £20 a month. And I thought, well, that's not a difficult one. I could do that without any training. But the trained advisor sat down with her and really pulled all the information out here. That was only one wee part of between 4 and 7 issues that this lady had. And what really stuck with me was that they had a weekly income coming into that household of £114 in pennies coming into the household, and necessary outgoings without anything frivolous, £112 in pennies. They had £2 to themselves every week, and that was it. And while the advisor was away printing off the bits and pieces that they'd done, I asked the lady, I says, what do you actually live on with your £2 a week that you have? And she said it's a rotation of a bag of rice, a bag of chips and a bag of potatoes every week. And if we feel frivolous, if it's Christmas or it's a birthday, we'll maybe buy half a dozen eggs to put an egg on top of it. It's there. I wanted to take that lady up the street and buy her a fish supper there and then. And I knew at that time that I'd made a great career decision to move into Citizens Advice Scotland. And I think that really in that one wee case study illustrates for me, and this was before COVID times, this was before the cost of living times, this was before the impact of all this environmental scan has hit us, is that what people in our region are dealing with and the lack of quality of life that they actually have, and the opportunity that Citizens Advice has right in the middle of that as that exemplar organisation is to help people working in partnership along with others out of poverty. And really, I've no intention of covering any of the environmental scan, but as I say, please, in the time that we have afterwards, ask me any questions that you wish to, and I'll pass you over to Marcelly.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Just in the interest of transparency, I feel like I need to say at the start, I'm also interim chair of NHS Dumfries and Galloway, just so that people are aware of that. So you've heard some really hard-hitting stories from my Citizens Advice colleagues. I just want to start by putting on record our thanks for the funding on behalf of both our organisation and, in fact, the people who use our services. What we do would be impossible without that funding. The £905,000 that was secured from the Commission in 2019, which has been static ever since, we have worked out is now worth £666,000 because of inflation. And as you've heard from Phil, your return on investment is pretty significant. What really matters, though, is the impact on our citizens and our communities. And if we didn't exist, as Phil has already highlighted, there'd be huge pressure on public services and people's lives would be even more miserable. So we use your funding for maximum impact, and we also leverage in quite a lot of additional funding, as I know is referenced in your report. That is becoming more and more challenging for us as third sector organisations all chase the same pots of funding. We know the economic outlook doesn't look too clever. We think we could help more people if we had some additional resource. And by resource, I mean our general specialist advisors and our volunteers, who are absolutely fantastic. Volunteers, as I'm sure you know, are becoming more and more challenging to find. But we do keep focused and bring some great people into the organisation, and that we do know that we impact on those individuals as well, because quite often they're people who step into us to get back into work, which is a real benefit for people who do that as well. Looking to the future, we are a really ambitious charity, not for ourselves, but actually for people who live in Dumfries and Galloway. And we believe that the best way to reach people who need our help is to offer a multi-channel approach: phone, email, face-to-face, access through social media platform messaging. We're building partnerships with our organisations to help us reach right out into our communities and put staff in locations that matter and that pick up quite a significant number of people we see who we know are geographically excluded. And we believe that that's our future. We've got places like Wigton, Moffat, New Galloway, Balmaclellan covered by some of our outreach, and more and more. We're very happy to talk about that after I've finished. But we do think that partnership is our future, and that's part of the answer to making us financially sustainable as well. Working together with partners is where the game has got to be. So our guiding principle as an organisation is that we provide independent advice and support to people in the right place, at the right time, in the right way for them, and at the right cost, because we have to be able to balance our books in the same way as everybody else does. We would be open to having discussions where appropriate about what more we could do to support people facing economic challenge, and which we know does hugely impact on their general well-being, sometimes of our neighbours, even sometimes families and friends that we've got. Our current contract ends at the end of 2026, and there's a 2-year option to renew or to extend at the end of that. We would really just ask you to consider the value in its widest sense in terms of some of the stuff you've heard from us today, of what we're doing when you're considering future funding decisions. And I just feel like I need to end by paying tribute to our incredible staff and our volunteers, because they're the people that do all this work in our communities day in, day out. Thank you.
I think we all share that. Thanks to the staff, dedicated staff who provide such a great service, and thank you for sharing the good work you do, the challenges it faces, and the case studies. And you want to come in?
No, just when we open it.
We'll open up to questions now. Then, Davis.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. First of all, thanks for coming along and giving such a great presentation. I know, let's say, obviously from working for the Citizens Advice for many years in my career, what a worthwhile service it is. And people find a lot of comfort in coming and getting the advice and assistance from you. My first question is, referral turnaround time currently, you know, from receiving a referral, what's the sort of waiting time for a client to get an appointment at this moment in time?
Thanks very much for your first question and those kind words, Councillor Davis. The answer to that is it varies. But one of the things that we have done, Christine touched on meeting that demand, but one of the things that we have done is that we have changed the way that we actually deal with all these initial inquiries, be it whatever way they come to us, is that we triage each and every single inquiry that comes in, so that those that are the essentials, we're getting evicted tomorrow or we're getting sequestrated today or whatever else, they'll be done first. It's there. Where a triage-trained member of staff is able to answer queries and to refer to other partner organisations or whatever, that'll be done at the time there as well. And then thereafter, based on the priority or the urgency, is that'll dictate when others that will be seen. Marcely spoke about our multi-channeled approach there as well, and what we tend to do is that we've got online, we've got benefits checkers, we've got our worksheets, we've got our toolkits and everything else like that, is that those that we believe are able to assist themselves will point them to that in the first instance, and then if they need a level of assistance after that, they'll come back to us.
Just to come back in on the multi-channel approach, Marceli had went and mentioned social media messaging. I just wondered if any sort of consideration had been given to sort of like design an app for people to access advice. Has that been given any thought?
Not locally, but it is a consideration. But Citizens Advice Scotland, who part of our membership is that we pay them for our shared services, which is the technical services, and we're looking at apps and a whole variety of ways of how we make best use of artificial intelligence and everything else, not just as DAGCAS, but as a whole network of 59 bureaux across Scotland.
And finally, you would be happy to take direct referrals from elected members? Yeah.
Yes, we already do,
yeah.
and we've circulated far and wide our referrals. It's an interesting point when you talk about referrals, is that one of the things that we've seen that doesn't work is signposting to us, signposting from us, and those are lessons that we've learned over the time, is that a person that's really at their wit's end, that goes to an organisation, be it whatever organisation, that just gets signposted to say, go and see DAGCAS at Stranraer or wherever else, is that a lot of times they won't turn up because they've been brave to make that initial contact, but then that's taken away from them. So we need to really promote and push inward and outward referrals as a process rather than signposting.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I've got Councillor Marshall, followed by Councillor McFarlane, followed by Councillor Ferguson, then Councillor Lowe. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Doug Cass and the representatives, you know, for a really kind of insightful presentation, and also really just to thank you for the fantastic service that you provide right across our region. And I did hear within that as well that, and it is a challenge with regards to, I mean, luckily we have the commission with the council, but obviously there's always the search for other funding, which as time has progressed is more and more difficult to achieve. But it's really just to kind of say, first of all, you know, it's amazing when you look at the report on page 24.18, the performance measures and the exceeding of the targets in every one of those, and you know the number of customers 1395, and to actually more than double that to 2842 is highly commendable. But my question is as well, because I did hear about resource issues, etc., but it does state that the Information and Advice Services Commission does set the key performance indicators, but from your performance, it suggests that you're resourced adequately to actually overachieve in every one of those targets. And is that something that maybe, I'm not criticising, but I'm just kind of trying to understand, is the performance indicators too low that have been set, or are they reviewed?
Thanks very much, Councillor Marshall. I'll start the answer to that, and then I'll bring Christine in for some of the operational side of things. Is that are the performance indicators too low? No, I think they're representative of the funding that we receive. What I would suggest, though, is that the feedback that I get from the staff and the volunteers is that they're working under pressure. They're working at 125% of their capacity, is what feeds back into me as well. And hence the reason, one of the things is that we are trying to create additional capacity because we're not dealing with that demand. And that demand, although we didn't put a figure on it earlier, is that for months and months and months, there was 185 people that were waiting on advice from us that we couldn't get to. So it's for me, it's not about meeting the targets of this AIS Commission or from our funding that we get from elsewhere. It's about meeting the needs of the people of Dumfries and Galloway that are vulnerable, that they're hard to reach, that they're struggling, that we want to reach out to make sure that they get the level of support that gives them that better quality of life. I'll bring Christine in with her thoughts as well.
Thanks, Phil. One of the things I would say with the KPIs, that is obviously just at specific areas of advice that we deal with as well. And that's why with the statistics that I provided, that's showing the sort of wider picture that we're actually dealing with. One of the other things is that depending on how many volunteers we're able to attract and train, it does increase our capacity a bit, but that can vary a lot because people's circumstances change. A lot of people come to us. It is about the training that we give that then gets them into paid employment, so we then lose them. Either they come into projects that we're running or paid employment out in the public sector or other areas of paid employment. So the capacity can sort of fluctuate quite a bit. As I say, also that figure doesn't show the wider picture that we're actually dealing with in general, and all of the different issues that people come to us, because as I said before, they come to us with one issue and it turns out that they've actually got several, so that our total figures demonstrate that more clearly, but the actual KPIs are only focused on specific things.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marshall, are you happy with that?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm trying to put my camera on just to politeness. There we go. Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Phil, Christine and Marshall, for your presentation. And I think in particular, the example that Phil gave of, this is easy, it turned out, here's what the issue is, and, I can help you with that. And then how complex it became, I think it really epitomises why we pulled this committee together. There's a lot of poverty out there that's hidden, where people are actually striving very, very hard just to sort of try and get by, and it's not obvious to people that can't see it. One of the things I would be interested in is it possible to tell us how often you have to get involved in determining an outcome for residents where they're dealing with benefit or welfare decisions that are made by the council, and how that's adversely impacting upon them? Thanks.
Christine?
Okay, thank you. We don't have exact figures that I could give to hand. Most of the benefits decisions that we're involved with and actually appealing against are the disability benefits. And previously that was DWP, but these are obviously all transferring over to Scottish Social Security. So it tends to be these are the benefits that we actually are having to appeal against and get more involvement. Occasionally there is ones around sort of your housing benefits or applications for welfare fund and things like that, but it's predominantly DWP and Scottish Social Security benefits.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, the example Phil gave was in relation to council tax. So I'm wondering how often that impacts. Now, I know that there are certain people who obviously get mitigated and you know, they get reductions in the council tax rates, but I'm wondering just how often, particularly in view of the fact that we've had to increase council tax rates in this last year. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for that question. Interestingly, that we're just in the process of receiving some funding through Citizens Advice Scotland, as are the other bureau, the other 58 bureau throughout Scotland, to put together a project where we will be working very closely with the council tax team for us to be able to give that advice, support and assistance that those that are in council tax debt, to help them find a way through. Interestingly, that DAGCAS was one of the pilot projects already in Scotland that evidenced a need for Citizens Advice Scotland to find that funding for the entire network to demonstrate the value of that partnership working that we can put together to resolve it, so that there's more money going into the council coffers through people being able to pay their council tax debt, and for the people of Dumfries and Galloway, not just the ability to pay, but the reassurance of the support, as well as the understanding of entitlements that they would get out of the system. So it's about raising that knowledge. I think if there's any more detail, they'll bring Christine in to answer.
Yeah, with the council tax, it's at about 25% of clients are struggling with council tax, where we are assisting with debt issues and other financial matters. So it's about 25%.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Chair, for letting me in. Good morning, three of you, and thanks very much for the presentation. So far, I was sitting here kind of smug because it was part of the decision to make our DAGCAS one of the best funded ones in Scotland at the time. And we've been sitting smug here, and then Marcella hits the nail on the head, is because we've not been cutting it per se. We've been leaving it stagnant going along, and with inflation kicking in, of course, then you're falling further and further behind all the time. And so thanks for actually drawing that to my attention, and I'll maybe come back with a recommendation on that at the end, Chair, if I can. Just another couple of things here, though. I suppose one of the reasons for this committee, or this subcommittee, is to find out where the blockages are in systems. So I suppose we need an honest answer. I'm not suggesting it would be dishonest, right? But an honest answer is, where do you find the blockages when you're working within the council or our partners? Because unless we know where the blockages are, we can't phone Dynarod and clean them, right, if you get my drift. So it would be helpful if you could let us know where you get frustrations, for example, your staff, your people who are giving up, either employed or they're volunteers, giving up valuable time, and then they're hitting, not quite a brick wall, but parts of the council where you get my drift, yeah?
Thanks, Councillor. Thanks for the plumbing analogy. Could pass it over. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I think a lot of the frustration, it's not necessarily around the council. It is about the sort of national sort of bodies and in sort of public sector. So, as I say, your DWP, your Scottish Social Security. I think one of the good things is over the years we've worked very good working relationships within council departments. Now, the council tax side of things was one of the areas in the past, but as Phil mentioned, we have been working on a project, a pilot one over the last few months about getting better sort of working together and how we can actually help. So I think we've been doing a lot of work. I think one of the frustrations that sometimes the advisors feel is not having direct contacts with some departments. I think that's one of the things, so they do have to just go through the general number and sit in a queue the same as anybody else, as opposed to having a direct line into that department. That is the only sort of frustration that we sometimes see.
Ferguson? Before I bring in Councillor Lowe, maybe I ask Wendy Jesson a question on behalf of the Council. How does our benefit maximisation team dovetail in with what the Citizens Advice Service do? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, everyone. In relation to the Fiat team and the other Dumfries and Galloway Council benefit maximisation teams, we have strong dovetailing practices with DAGCAS. So in relation to the Advice and Information Services Commission, which is delivered, the main target audience within Dumfries and Galloway is anyone under the age of 60 who requires any help and advice under the parameters of the commission that is set. Plus, as Phil and the others have explained, they cover various other services throughout the delivery of all of their services. In terms of the council services, the Fiat team delivers services to anyone over the age of 60. So there's the direct complement there where anyone over the age of 60 would be referred on to the Fiat team from DAGCAS and vice versa from the Fiat team to DAGCAS. So it works really well. The services relate to each other very well, send referrals back and forward. There will be the odd occasion where someone may be over the age of 60 but would prefer to be dealt with by DAGCAS for personal reasons, and again vice versa. It might be a council employee that would rather not go to another council service to receive detailed benefit maximisation advice, or if it's debt management advice in particular, even though everything's all confidential and the teams are excellent that Lorna manages. But on those occasions, nobody would ever be stopped from going to the alternative service, because I always feel really strongly that people in poverty still deserve to have choices. They can't be dictated to about which service they can or can't use, and just having that choice of where they can go makes a major difference to them and provides them with services that fit their exact needs, and they're not being told they can't go to certain services. But it does work really well. Very good question. Thank you.
Much, Wendy. That's a good answer to that one. And Councillor Lowe, followed by Councillor Scobie.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm struggling with bad connection today, so I hope I'm okay. So you were mentioning about signposting doesn't really work and direct referrals is much better, but also about your capacity. So I wonder if it would be possible with the places that you go to regularly other than your main office, the church halls and the other locations, whether you'd be able to provide us a list with the locations, the times, the days that you are there. Is it a regular cycle? And if that could maybe then go out to every elected member. So for those that we can maybe support to get into those sessions, to have that so we know what's happening within our wards. And the other thing I'm wondering is if you ever want to go out to other locations and maybe do one-off sessions with groups at all, do you do anything like go out to food banks, Veterans Garden or places like that? And are you hampered by digital connectivity at all in any areas of our region? Because that's something that we can maybe support with by enabling buildings to be better connected. But I was just wondering if digital connection was ever an issue. Thanks.
Thanks. Phil.
Thank you. I'll start with the digital connection. Is that being, and I think you will understand it yourself, is that it is a big issue in the more rural areas, is digital connection, and we've experienced that anywhere from working in the hospital in Dumfries all the way through to the Glenkens, the Machers, and everywhere else in terms of that digital connection, and having to spend more money on dongles that will help us to get that connection back into our AdvisorNet system and back into our castle recording systems and things like that we need to deliver. So any assistance that the local authority can give us or give to the region to improve that connectivity would be ideal. And the first part of your question round about where do we deliver our service, all our outreaches and those developing outreaches, they're all on our websites as the times, dates, places that's there for people to access. And I would have to say that in the past, when I've come out to all the political groups and any meetings that we have with council officers, is that there's always an opportunity for anybody that wishes to do so to come along and spend a day or a party a day with us and understand better just what the issues are and how we're dealing with them. And I want to reiterate that today as well. But partnership working as part of our right place, right time, right way at the right cost is absolutely massive for us, and it's about how we're growing. And I'll let Christine come in and Marcely come in if they've got something to say after this, is that it's all about growing those partnerships. An example of that is that we gained a bit of funding through the carer service to put an advisor in to start with a day a week into the carers hub in Nith Place. And in the first year of being in the right place, right time, right, delivering the service in the right way, put £1.2 million back into the pockets of carers in Dumfries and Galloway. And that's been expanded through Dumfriesshire Food Bank, through Apex Food Bank in Stranraer. The Trussell Trust, who fund that service that we're included in, have seen, not just with ourselves, but with others around the country, the value that that brings. And that's going nationwide throughout Scotland there as well, some of the funding for getting advisors into these locations. And we're doing an awful lot of work just now, and I'll bring Christine in to talk about the GP surgeries and CPAF funding and other bits and pieces that just demonstrate that value of working in partnership.
Yes, Phil says that we are always looking at new partnerships and funding to allow us to be out in more areas. And we've been working very closely with some GP practices across the region. And we do already have 2 up and running, both through in the Wigtonshire area, in Whithorn and in Drumore. But within the next few weeks, we will be going into the Upper Nithsdale GP group practices, both in Sanquhar and Kelholme. Will be alternating between the two. That was just agreed yesterday with the group up there, so that will be getting set up very soon. We're also working with Ecclefechan GP practice to try and get set up there as well. So these are some new ones, and in addition to that, Phil's been working around with the NHS about the hubs that there's going to be across the region, so to see about us getting in there. So that would be, there's Thornhill, Newton Stewart, Kirkcudbright. So we're looking at about getting in there. But also we were working closely with the old Johnston School at Kirkcudbright, and we're hoping to be up and running in there very soon as well. So, as I say, we're always looking at where we can get partnerships, and also about funding that allows us the additional resources to get out to these areas.
Yeah, I think it's just worth reiterating. I think we've realised, particularly since COVID, that we have to be really nimble around where we go and what we're going for. And I went to one of our outreaches in Castle Douglas, and a young man came in who had just been dismissed from his job with no notice. He lived with his mother between Kirkcudbright and Castle Douglas. He had no access to a car. They didn't have a laptop. They had no Wi-Fi. He'd hitched a lift to get to Castle Douglas. And it just made me realise, seeing it very starkly, actually, we have to be out in our communities, being able to access people who are completely excluded from digital access. And there is definitely a place for apps, bots, that kind of stuff on websites. But actually, the people that we deal with actually need a face-to-face presence as close to where they live as possible. So that's really part of where we think we need to be moving in future.
Just one wee example of that, flexibility and nimbleness in being where the people are is that one of the things that really shocked me when it was discussed in one of our meetings, that we have one of our outreaches just now is up at the Y Centre at the top of Lochside Road. And if we didn't have that there or Lincluden or somewhere else, it absolutely shocked me that if somebody that doesn't get free travel that needs our service, it would cost them £5.20 return in the bus to come from the top of Lochside Road to the town and back again. And at a presentation that I did to the Poverty and Inequalities Lived Experience group last week, they were talking about the cost of a bus from Thornhill into the town, or we were even looking at the cost of a bus from Kirkcudbright to Castle Douglas, and I couldn't find a bus from Kirkcudbright to Castle Douglas. And I think one of the issues round about that is that I'm expecting, or was expecting, a question round about services in the stewardship. And really one of the issues round about that was that through the loss of fund in 2018 into 19 is that we had to downsize and get rid of our stewardship bureau in Castle Douglas. But in some respects that was a blessing, because it has allowed us to try different avenues of delivering that service. We started off, we were in the libraries. They didn't work because nobody was coming near them on days that they were shut, and we were the only ones that were in. Lynn was a big part of that, actually. It was she. And then we've got partnerships with the church, the parish church at Castle Douglas. We were in the Glen Kens and others. And again, this is all experience that has developed there that says this is the right way for us to deliver that service, so that people don't have to spend £5.20 of money that they haven't got to come and see us or more.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer. Kim, do you want to come back? Councillor Lowe?
Yeah, Jess, thank you. I think all I would just say is you're doing your level best with the sort of circumstances that we've got now with bus services and everything. If you do find there are locations where you really need to be, I would really encourage you to come through to report them to the council, because maybe through our discretionary area funds and stuff we can support, particularly if it's a non-council building, we could use those funds to maybe support those communities to be better connected, and then that gives a chance for you guys and everyone else to get out and use those buildings better. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie, followed by Councillor Drysdale.
Thanks, Chair. A lot's been said about performances, and I think you're to be applauded. There's a lot to take in. There's a lot to take in your presentations as well. Can I maybe focus in, rather than the performance and a number of issues that have been mention that's been made of it. And I think it was Marsali that spoke about, the help more people. And I think, Dagcast, Andy spoke about, he was there in Dagcast to maximise the contribution. I was there when it was the Citizen Advice Bureau, but the welfare rights organisations that we had dotted right across the region, and then they decided to come together as Dagcast at that time. But throughout that period, and Christine referred to about debt, 25% council tax, rent arrears and so forth. At one time, Dagcast did represent people in court evictions, decrease and so forth. So in terms of capacity, do you still do that? And there are others. So in a sense, I can well remember the individual in Sonora. I can't remember his name, but Ian King, big loss. Yeah. Ian did a lot of that court work. So, to look at that in terms of how do we work in partnership. The other one that I would ask about, and Marsali again referred to it, that you dealt with a young guy that was dismissed, and in your presentation you talked about new employment law. Again, employment tribunals and giving advice on employment rights. And I think back to Nori in Stranraer, 94-year-old, and still doing a tremendous job in Dagcas, but slightly has drawn back on doing tribunals. I just wonder if that's still something that you'd be contemplating doing, because there are a lot of people out there that do need that kind of advice. The other one is in the small debtors court. I think it's now Simple Court, and Dagcas were renowned for representing people in that. I just wonder what the capacity is to either reintroduce those services or initiate them. And my last one, and I heard Wendy speaking about partnership and how you partnership with our maximisation team, an excellent response. But I have been in touch with Stranraer Citizens Advice, as I'm often, and it's a two-way process. They'll refer people with first housing issues to myself, and we work together. But you've got the faculty of advocates, and I just wondered if you use them as often as perhaps you could or should, in terms of some of the complex cases. And Dagcas is one of the referral organisations to try and get representation at that level in terms of the faculty advocates. And I've known a case anyway where that was used. And it's just to expand that if the capacity is there.
So, question on the legal representation part and advice?
Yep. Well, again, we'll do it as a double header. I'll speak about the employment advice aspect of it in the wider operational representation. I'll bring Christine in to talk about. Interestingly, we've been running and are still running for another year. It's been funded for through the Robertson Trust and part of it through Citizens Advice Scotland as an employment law project, the ERAS project, Employment Rights and Advice Service, that ourselves and the three Borders bureaus, we got a significant amount of funding from the Robertson Trust for 2 advisors, and it'll be running for about 3 years to provide that high level representation that through the volunteers like Nori or John Dennis or others that have gone before them, is not able to, with the complexity and the time involved, to take cases to tribunals, is that we've got the funding for 2 officers that covers from Dromore to Eyemouth, and it's no very many, and they can only deal with so many cases, but we've got that running. And interestingly, the experiences that have come out of it that's there, that is complex cases nowadays, is that we're seeing them that have been set down for 4-day hearings in court in tribunals. It's there. So that would ordinarily be a volunteer advisor that couldn't do it. So our advice really had to stop at level 1 advice, and that the level 2, tier 2 advice. So that was the reason ourselves and the Borders managers got this funding to take forward. So, and again, the learning from it is helping to influence throughout Scotland. That I'm part of a working group there, working with Citizens Advice Scotland, to see if we can build on that, the mainstreaming of employment advice into our into the opportunities that we supply at that representation level, because if we didn't have that funding, we wouldn't be able to take people to tribunals or even the stages before that, because it's just too much time, too complex, and it's there. In terms of using the faculty advocates through the ERAS project, the employment project, our coordinator does link in with them all the time, and the likes of family law centres or the law group in Glasgow. I just forgot their name there, but so we do link in with specialists as well too, and they're ready to help us. But in terms of those wider operational representations, I'll bring Christine in to answer that.
Okay, thanks. The short answer is yes, we do represent in rent arrears cases, but it's not through our commission, it's actually funding through the Scottish Legal Aid Board. We previously, through that same funding, we did represent in the simple procedures, which is your civil procedures. But unfortunately, last year, the Scottish Legal Aid Board removed that funding throughout Scotland. So we've had to stop doing that. Again, the funding that we've had for a long, long time, and this is, albeit in excess of 10 years, has been flat funding. So the amount of hours that we can actually provide has reduced, unfortunately. But yes, we are still representing in rent arrears cases. With the simple procedures, although we're not funded to represent, we will assist clients with how to put together their own case and what they need to do to actually defend a simple procedure case or raise one. So we'll still help give them the advice on that. And also, more generally with the Faculty of Advocates, yes, we use them where we can, but again, they have limited capacity for how many cases they can take on.
Yeah, I'm pleased with the response, but I'm disappointed as well, because you've got people who are reluctant to come even to citizens' advice, and it's difficult to get them over the door. It's even more difficult to get them into a court in front of a sheriff to do that representation. So it's I would like to think everybody would join a union and they would be able to get representation at the tribunals, but not everybody does. And just to what you say, the reason being that the Legal Aid Board reduced the funding for legal aid. So you've got a whole gap in there, a vacuum of people that are just out there not getting the advice and assistance that they require, not just to give advice, but to actually represent. And I just make the point that it was something that DAGCAS did provide in the past, and it's just unfortunate, whether it's a capacity or a funding issue, then it's something that I would hope that you would consider at some time. That maybe that we've got to consider how much funding we give to it, but it's that thing. I maybe missed it, Chair. My other question was, see, when, for people being signposted, is it by appointment, or is DAGCAS still open for people just to walk in?
We are open for people just to walk in as well as by appointment. So it's really what suits individuals.
Councillor Drysdale.
Good morning, members. Thank you very much to the team for the presentation and also the amazing cases that you're dealing with in the volume, but also credit to the volunteers as well. I know the huge amount of work they undertake. So it was just on the back of Councillor Lowe's question. I noticed on page 18 that you are doing the Castle Douglas reach out. So I had noticed that and was going to comment, but there's been a huge queue of people speaking. I noticed that you are meeting at the church hall, and I just wondered if there was a reason for that, because obviously there's a little bit of distance between the church hall and the Stepping Stones project and the community centre and the town hall, and a lack of internet access. So if you could just explain to me why. I'm not anti the church hall at all. There may be good reasons for that. And also just with regards to the communication of DAGCAS, I actually have to search for it, and I've just literally searched and put a post up today, but I realise I've missed lots of the meetings that you've already had. Whilst I commend the outreach programmes, I think it would actually be really helpful if once a month members were given a quick email, because we're more than delighted to share that information and promote the excellent service that you provide. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Phil.
Thanks for that. The history of Castle Douglas outreach, it goes back to when we closed the Castle Douglas office, and we were looking at ways to deliver the service throughout the stewardship. and the first way we were delivering the service was through the library at Castle Douglas, and Councillor Davis was heavily involved in the delivery of that service. We found that it didn't work because it was a day, as I say, that the library was shut. The only people that were really coming near us, despite all our advertising, was those that were trying to return library books. And on the odd occasion that I went down as that I was acting librarian, you'll be glad to hear that from a cost point of view, I didn't charge the council for librarian services when I was there, nor did my colleagues. Did we? But really, joking aside, that it was the minister from the parish church that came in to return a library book, and I was speaking to her. She was very interested in her service, and I was telling her about the challenges of nobody attending, that it was out of the way. And it was then that the minister offered us a partnership at very, very low cost, along with the parish church there, that we could get a dedicated room for advice given. We could get a shared room for following up on any other clients that were coming in, and possibly even the use of a third room. And there was an awful lot going on, and there still is a lot going on in the parish church with all the community groups that use it, and that's where we've ended up. So in terms of at the right cost, is that it costs us absolutely peanuts. I hope the minister isn't watching this actually, so and wants to put the costs up for us, but it costs us absolutely peanuts. And that the Wednesdays and the Fridays that we deliver down there is absolutely ram-packed with both drop-in clients as well as appointments at the same time. So it has worked for us, that we don't need that bureau. We do engage with some of the other projects, and hopefully through our publicity and social media footprint is that anybody that's going to some of the other charities and other organisations that can assist will also be referred to us at the same time. And hopefully that answers your question, Councillor.
Councillor Drysdale.
Yes, I do appreciate the answer to that question. Thank you so much.
Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the three of you for coming along this morning and giving us a really comprehensive overview of the tremendous work you're doing across the region, and thanks to your staff and volunteers. I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Ferguson said. I think we understand very well that no uplift in budget in a 5-6 year period is essentially very much a real terms cut, and I think it's been really insightful today to see the breadth of work and support that you're doing out there. So just going back to the 25% of council tax debt as being part of the system, that I suppose begs the question for me, is that very similar to the rest of Scotland and other local authority areas? And if it is, it's not for today and it's not for in this space. I think members need to better understand what the circumstances of that 25% are, because maybe we don't have the right council tax reductions and benefits in place. Now, I understand that that would probably require secondary legislation through Parliament, but if we've got a similar pattern across Scotland, and it's people that are probably in work, actually, I suspect, do we have the right reductions in place? And should we be lobbying on the basis of information and data for some rejigs to that reduction scheme? Or discount scheme, whatever you want to call it. So I think that's to pick up out with the committee, because obviously, we don't want to delve into individuals' personal circumstances here, but it's a really interesting statistic that 25% is council tax debt, and what can we do about that as elected members with the Scottish Parliament? So I pose that to you, but probably not for today. My final question, and anyone or all three of you can answer it. If you had one ask of us as elected members and the council to help you do what you do, what would it be? Not putting you on the spot, my Sally.
So we'll take the council tax question first, then we'll go on. Is Christine going to speak first?
Yes, I'll go in with the council tax. There is similar problems throughout Scotland, but as we mentioned about the council tax project, that we were part of the pilot and then we're working on that, that is funding for funded across the whole of Scotland, all council areas, and that is part of the reason for that project, is so that we can look at what needs to change, what help is needed for people, and ultimately it's so that the councils are actually getting the money, but at the same time people are able to deal with the situations. So that project, as it works through in the coming year, hopefully will have learnings that can be taken back to Scottish Government.
In terms of your ask, Gail, I think it would be really useful to work with officers to get us to a point of actually understanding what our realistic cost would look like to deliver what we do. As I said, we are fishing in the same pond as most other third sectors for funding, and it is becoming more and more challenging over time. So just a bit of realism about this is, if you want a comprehensive service with employment rights, for example, this is what it would cost you, and then you have a menu to choose from, and then you've got your eyes really open in terms of what you're not funding and what you are. And then as an organisation, we do already go to other places to seek money. We bolster services by doing that. We increase our reach, increase our expertise. So I think having that menu approach in terms of future funding might be quite interesting.
Can I be greedy and no just ask for one thing and reiterate what Marcely was saying, Councillor McGregor, is that moving forward, in addition to that work there for round about the funding, is that my ask is for elected members and council officers to work closely with us to help identify those really effective partnerships. That partnership working almost like the MASH that's in place at police headquarters there, that's got the client right in the middle of it, and each and every partner works towards the needs of that client there, and that's the most effective and efficient way of doing it. And at the same time, for elected members and council officers to better understand our service, and this is a great opportunity today to come along and spend a day with us and help us to identify and find ways of accessing additional funding and additional access to volunteers as well too.
On that, Phil, is there enough forums or fora to discuss these matters with officers to address these issues?
There are a number of fora available to us, both formal and informal, that we make use of. But I think any opportunity that comes along would be absolutely ideal. We are part of the housing and homeless side of things. We are part of other groups. We do attend. We are in the Poverty and Inequalities Partnership, and Christine takes a lead role in that side of things. But just any of those, probably both formal and informal opportunities there for that greater understanding to help us achieve what we want to achieve for the people of Dumfries and Galloway.
I think our officials and the members have taken that in. So I'd just like to thank Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, Nick's got me down there to speak. The leader and the three guests have kind of encapsulated what I was wanting to come to when I spoke very early on. Given that it's reviewed annually, yeah, I get that, through the commissioning process. At least I think it's annual, isn't it? Yeah, it's an annual commission, yeah. But
the current commission was 3 years,
3 years, yeah,
with the possibility of 2-year extension, so it comes up for reconsideration for December next year.
Right, okay, well, that's fine, so thanks very much for that clarity. So I think my suggestion is here is that we can make a recommendation to the parent committee. That this should be.
Can we just do that when we come to the recommendation? We'll give you the chance to do that in a minute. But two more speakers, and
okay.
and then we'll let, once we come to recommendation we want a recommendation 5. We'll come to, after done 4, we'll do 5. Thanks, Lynn. Your turn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going back to my time working with Citizens Advice when I worked in the housing project, when you obviously go out and about doing outreach clinics around the region, but we actually were present when somebody was presenting as homeless in the council's homeless department, and that way you were getting the person straight after they'd presented, getting in there, getting the information, seeing if they've got any benefits issues, debt issues, if they had rent arrears, you know, getting them in there early to get repayment plans to prevent them from being evicted. And I'm just wondering if any thought had been given about going back into the homeless department to do that kind of outreach again.
Thanks for the question. We haven't actually looked at physically having a presence there, but one of the things I would say is we actually do work very closely with the housing and homeless team and the WHO team, and particularly where clients have rent arrears and we may be representing, they will look at how they can help to get funding for that to cover the rent arrears or other help as well. So we are working very closely with them. So clients that are identified, whether they come via ourselves or through the homeless department, actually we then work together to get a resolution for them.
I think just linked into that, Councillor Davis, is that as part of that development of partnerships, in one of the meetings we had recently, not with housing or homeless, but with the employability and skills team and working with Greg, is that we're looking to for somebody from employability and skills for getting people onto the pipeline, coming into our offices and being a presence there as well when it's working with especially young people that are struggling to find suitable employment, and again for us to be available within one of those locations, right place, right time, right way at the same time. So these partnerships are developing with various directorates in the council.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Marshall, no, then we'll go to the recommendations after that. Councillor Marshall, are you there?
Yeah, it's just in relation to consider something under the recommendations, whether or not to put it forward now or wait until we've done the first 4 recommendations and add any more. Just looking for Chair's advice.
Yeah, we'll wait to that time. Thanks, Councillor Marshall. Okay, well, thank you very much, Phil, Christine and Marcelly, for your answering all the questions comprehensively. Could you pass on our thanks to all your volunteers and staff for the hard work, for your persistence and determination to support all our constituents throughout Dumfries and Galloway. So if we could pass that on, that would be great. So thank you very much for coming along today. We've got a few recommendations to do, so once you've listened to the arguments on recommendation 5, then we'll let you go and get on with the day job. So recommendations have already agreed to receive the presentation, and we have scrutinised the outcomes from our partnership with the Citizens Advice Bureau. And 3, we have noted, shall we note the findings of the Dumfries and Galloway Citizens Advice Service Cost of Living Report 2024 as detailed in section 4.1 to 12. Yeah. And 4, note the case studies outlining the impact on individuals as detailed in Appendix 3, and I'll pass you over to Councillor Ferguson, who was the first to suggest we have an additional recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's quite simple. I think it's within our delegations to refer this back to the Parent Committee and to the Budget Panel so we can get cross-party agreement on this. This is something that shouldn't be political. It affects everyone. And just to review the funding arrangements we have in place for DAGCAS.
I think that's competent, Nick. So we can shall we all agree to that we pass it on to the Parent Committee and get a report to the Budget Panel on it? I think is that what you're looking for?
I would actually suggest some work with the budget panel so that they all understand it. But Leader, I'm sure, can take that forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that anyway, but I think Phil gave a very clear ask that we work as elected members and officers with DAGCAS to create what we require going forward. You know, because we can all look for improvement everywhere, but I think that commitment has to be there from elected members and officers as well.
Are you willing to incorporate that in your
Yes, please. I thought it was kind of, it would have been inherent in the whole thing that would have happened. Yes. But yeah, if you want to spell it out, I'm happy. Yeah.
Nick will tell us what we're agreeing to in a second, but I'll ask Councillor Marshall to come in and see if he's happy with that or he wants further.
Yeah, Chair, it was on a separate issue, but it was something I think that Christine raised that kind of resonated with me, and it's an issue that councillors have raised before, and it's in relation to, and hopefully it can be incorporated in a recommendation or an action from this committee, but it's in relation to how the council can work better with DAGCAS as an organisation. And she did raise the fact, and right to do so, that, you know, DAGCAS really should have a direct line rather than going through the normal operator. I mean, you may be sitting with a client on quite a few occasions where you're sitting 14th in the queue. That's not really acceptable. But really, you know, members have raised this before as well. We used to have a direct line because, you know, we represent 10,000 constituents in Dumfries and Galloway, and sometimes we have to deal with similar issues, and we actually are stuck in the telephone system line. So I really just want this committee maybe to agree to explore the options, and it's maybe just to reintroduce the direct line to the councillors had, but also to extend that to DAGCAS and probably any other key partners, especially when it's to tackle poverty, etc. So I really do think that that's something that would speed up time for DAGCAS, but also for elected members on issues such as this. So I think it's either we actually look how we can introduce that, because the EMES system, sometimes you can't wait 5 or 6 days for a response, or also to provide a direct line for DAGCAS to the key departments they need to contact rather than waiting in the queue.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Marshall. The Director wants to come in on that one.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Marshall. We are currently looking at how the public and partners access all council services, and there's a piece of work ongoing to look at that, digital front door, etc. So we could take, if it's appropriate to members, we could take that away as an action and ask the people who are working on, you know, the way that the public and other partners access council services as a priority. We could include that as an action if that's acceptable.
Right, as suggested, Councillor Marshall, we'll take it as an action, a strong action point from the meeting, if that's okay. Yeah,
I'm happy with that, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, and Nick, could you just tell us what we were agreeing to on Councillor Ferguson amendment with the addition from the leader?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think if you will allow us, we'll come up with a specific form of words, but essentially the intention was for a referral to go back to the parent committee and through budget panel in terms of a discussion around how we can work better with DAGCAS, and we've had the discussion around the menu of services, etc., that DAGCAS provide, and how we might have a discussion around taking that forward in terms of the ongoing relationship with DAGCAS and between DAGCAS and the council in terms of the delivery of appropriate services. I appreciate that. That's a bit of a long-winded spiel there.
Chair, if I can come back in, the idea behind it was so we could have cross-party support come budget time, so it didn't have to become a political potato at budget time. Yeah, it's something that could be done and arranged, and if it's done that way, like we did that last budget, we had a number of things which we agreed actions to do. That would be my preferred route for this, rather than come back to a bean fight on budget day.
So, yeah, I think we've got cross-party support for that and all party support for that, so I think that's the way forward. Happy to agree that that's subject to Nick coming up with the right form of words. Yeah, okay. So thank you very much. So thank you again for attending. Hopefully you feel we have had a positive response from members and members of staff as well. Thank you.
And just many thanks for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
We're on to item 5, end of year evaluation report on tackling poverty and inequalities projects April 2024 to March 2025. And future options for our council's funding for projects that tackle poverty and inequalities, and is a report by the head of Thriving Communities. This report provides members with the end of year evaluation report on the delivery of all the projects which have been supported by 1.827 million of policy investment funding to mitigate against the worst effects of the cost of living crisis and to tackle poverty and inequalities from 1st of April onwards, and to consider the future approach to this work. This report delivers on commitments made in this committee to bring back a detailed report on all projects funded to tackle poverty and inequalities, and the report gives details on each of the projects, including quantitative data alongside case studies of each project, which outline the impact on individuals and communities. This committee has also asked for a report to consider core funding projects to allow for a long-term approach to some of this work. This report is also asking members to formalise and agree this approach to core funding that would allow officers to bring forward a report after summer recess with recommendations on core funding of projects from 26-27 financial year. Harry Hayes is here. Yeah, online. Head of Thriving is online, and Mark Malloy, Service Manager, and Wendy Jesson is here in the hall to assist if members have any questions. Yeah, just before we begin the debate proper, just had some feedback on the on the way the report is displayed. But I think there is a good reason for that. If you want to expand that, Mark, and say and also tell us anything more that you want to see on the report.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of the feedback that was received in terms of the format of the report, I would bring to members' attention that this report and evaluation has previously went to our Council's Communities Committee, and the current format was recommended by members at the previous Communities Committee because members fed back that they didn't like the previous format, so we changed the format, and then we've had feedback this time that the new format is not suitable for some members, so we'll take that feedback on and again look to see if there's a better way in which we can present the information.
Thank you very much, Mark, on that. Our first job is to review and scrutinise the overall outcomes and evaluation of the policy investment funded projects as detailed in Appendix 1. So I intend to go through Appendix 1 project by project, and at that stage could you indicate whether you want to speak on that item which we need to scrutinise. So we've got page 101 onwards, and the first one is Community 103 actually, Community Transport Public Sector Partnership. We spent £53,000 in it, and it scored 19 under the scoring system. If anyone wants to raise a question on community transport, now is the time. I've got Kim Lowe on Councillor Lowe on.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually not on any specific project, but it's on the general introduction, if that's okay. So before we go to the projects.
That's fine, yeah.
So page 94 and 95, the percentages that are used to go between the four areas, and it says that this is reviewed regularly. And one of the questions that we were just asking is we look at the free school meals and all the other criteria, but there are obviously changes in population with new homes being built or people moving from an area to be redeveloped. Are these incorporated so that a change can be made each year? So, for example, there is a lot of new housing going in through housing associations, that can be taken into account as well.
So that one, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I'm conscious the Head of Service is online, so if he wishes to come in first, it's sometimes quicker for those in the hall, but I'll give Harry his place, absolutely. But in terms of this specific question, what's been asked to members today is to update the data for 25-26, which does take into consider a range of factors which are in Appendix 3, and because we will be updating that annually, as members have previously agreed, it means that it would allow to take into consideration any changes in demographics to the number of houses or other changes against those data sets in each area. So absolutely would take into consider any changes, and that data is up to date as of the 31st of March 2025. So this is as most recent data as we could have, and this committee will give us the opportunity to bring that back annually each year for members to agree in advance of area committees meeting around their funding, should that funding be available in future years.
Thanks. Councillor Law, I'm going to let you go back in when we come to recommendation 4 on that one. So I'm going to stick to my original plan and take it one by one, because there's a series of recommendations, and the first recommendation is to scrutinise it. So we'll do that first, if that's okay. And we're talking about community transport, if anybody wants to come in that one. Councillor Jimison, is it on transport?
No, it's not. It's about opportunities for improvement, but I can wait till after you've finished that.
Okay, thanks. And Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, I wasn't sure how you were taking these, but I wouldn't have thought you'd have taken them one by one, but just as you have gone into that, because it's interesting to see the scores from the top to the bottom, as is provided in an earlier page. But just on this one, if you look at the, I'm quite sure the people who receive the taxi card will see it of great benefit. But when you look at it in terms of £100, the increase in taxi fares that there has been, I would say, without having to use a taxi, I would say it's something in the region of a £5, and that's one way, and then a £5 back. So rather than 20 journeys, you're getting 10 throughout the year. And again, I come back to the ones who use it, they'll see it as great value, but is it really? Are we benefiting, on that £100, or do we really need to look at, realistically, increasing that £100 to something more realistic in terms of once a week to get in for your shopping? That would only take you 10 weeks.
So, yeah, thanks Councillor Scobie there. Obviously, taxi card is sort of community transport, so we would take them both together. So, do you want to comment on that one? It's just a really comment, isn't it?
Yeah, no, sorry, I was just waiting to see if Harry was wanting to come in. But in terms of probably make the point in terms of the scores, Chair, first of all, that this was previously taken to Communities Committee, and we agreed that we would use the European Foundation for Quality Management, which is a globally recognised framework and supports changing in different projects. So each of the projects has been scored using the EFQM model, which essentially gives us an independent score around the impact on communities and individuals for these projects. So as opposed to just taking the service's own evaluations, which can sometimes be a wee bit like marking your own homework, even if people officers do it as independently as possible. So our business improvement team supported us to do this and to allocate the scores that are outlined in the table 2 on page 92 in terms of ranking those projects out of 30. So the members can see that the community transport and the taxi card scheme were two of the lowest projects. That's not to say they're not making a significant difference to individuals, but if you use them and compare against the other projects using that consistent framework, they do rank as some of the bottom projects. And then in terms of the final comment around the budget and the amount of money, the officers are delivering the project in line with the agreed budget that's there. So appreciating, similar to the previous report, as inflation costs go up and running costs for taxis go up to ensure they have a fair livelihood, that it does result in practice to people having less journeys due to the available budget.
Please, thanks for letting me back in. I just wonder what scope we've got in going through these one by one as a committee in terms of what can we do. Andy finished the last one saying about cross-party on DAGCAS and then bringing that back to the budget panel to consider. I think this is another one, and it was 2 meetings ago, and it was Sean that moved that he would like to see these, and I totally supported him, incorporated into the core budget. But what's the reason for going through one by one, given that the page before has the scores? Are we able to say, right, we approve from 19 up to 24? What is the scope that we're being asked to work to in this committee just now?
Our job now is to scrutinise these and make any comments we wish on this. And at the further stage, we're going to prioritise the ones which we want to go to core funding. So that's the next stage on that. Harry Hay would like to come in.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members, or good afternoon now, members. Just to build on Mark's very useful comments in terms of the taxi card scheme, and I guess it's just to give a bit of broader advice. Members, I think, have been quite clear both at this subcommittee and at other committees when referring and talking about the tackling poverty budget allocations and how important the impact of investment is and the difference it makes to people's lives. And I think the nub of this is to try and give as robust information as possible to members to start to make future informed decisions and choices. As Mark quite rightly outlined, the EFQM methodology that we've used is in an effort to try and make it as transparent and as consistent as possible to try and gauge the impact and the, I guess, almost return on investment that the council makes, regardless of the score in terms of the rankings. That's not to say or undermine that all these initiatives and projects don't make a difference to people's lives, but it's about to try and make future informed decisions that members may wish to take on board when it comes to future budget setting, for example. So I think, in terms of the scrutiny role of this committee, the team have certainly tried to give that level of information for members to look at where they may wish to make informed decisions in the future, but absolutely in members' hands in terms of the level of detail that they feel they need to be able to take that type of approach forward. Thank you, Chair.
I think Councillor Lowe wants to come in on taxi card scheme.
Yeah, thank you. So in the committee on the 30th of January, and prior to that committee in discussion with the lead officer, we made the suggestion that the current register is reviewed because there are people receiving taxi cards who can no longer use a taxi, maybe some going to the wrong address or whatever. And the response I received both in that meeting and from the officer was that within our current staffing and capability, we could do that. It does not seem to be reported, though, or recorded in any action tracker. I would like that now. It was one of the motions we put in for the budget, which got slightly generalised, that we would review all the options for tackling poverty. But one of the things we particularly raised was that this review was undertaken. Those who haven't used their taxi cards for maybe the last 18 months are contacted to see whether they still need them, so we could get a more accurate register. And then that may that allows us to target where we use the money. So please, could that be recorded as an action in this meeting?
Mr. Morgan, will you come in?
Thank you, Chair. I always smile when somebody calls me Mr. Morgan. It reminds me of my grandfather. I'm pretty sure I've said that in this chamber a few times. Councillor Lowe, just to update you, Mark Malloy actually contacted colleagues in the Transport Service to initiate the action as you've just highlighted, if it's helpful for members to have that formally recorded today, so there's a track of that, then happy to do so. If I may, though, that this particular report today is reporting on previous activity and it's evaluating previous activity, and it was agreed at full council, I think, that a report would come to this committee. If I may respond as well in terms of going through those one by one, then that's what the scrutiny is about. I think what I'm sensing from members in the chamber and online today, though, is that, and following on from the presentation we've had today, is that it might be helpful for you to have a specific seminar with officer support to look at what your strategic priorities are for tackling poverty and inequality. Because what we've got currently is a report on what's always been. And for yourselves, it's to set that strategic direction, to give us officers a way forward in terms of what needs to be delivered in the future. I think that kind of picks up on what Harry Hay was saying. I almost called him Mr. Hay a few minutes ago, but I think that picks up the sentiment of the room. I don't know if elected members would agree with that or not, but I just thought that might be helpful as an observation.
Are we all happy that we take that as an action to hold a seminar on the strategic direction going forward? Yeah, as outlined by Stephen Morgan.
Chair, it's maybe one of the better reports I've seen in terms of applications for funding and actually seeing the scoring and the narrative that followed it. So it's one of the better reports in terms of that. But I've asked the question, and it may be that we endorse what Stephen Morgan has said there in going for a seminar, because we need to know what our strategic approach is to this. Because, you know, I wouldn't like to think that we're going to say, well, taxi card will bump you when there are people who actually benefit from it, but it's the value of that benefit, as I've outlined, in £100. It may be that it requires, you know, if it meets that strategic target. So I think there's a much better way than to try to attempt going through these one by one.
I think so, but I think a scrutiny role, we can go through them very quickly. I think if there's any big issues, then we're not. But I've got Councillor McFarlane want to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've been waiting a wee while. But it's been useful because other people have got to make comment and I'll be able to pick up on it. I welcome Stephen's comments in relation to getting some sort of strategic perspective and rather than being looking backwards. So I think that's a positive. But a couple of people, Mark Malloy and Harry Hay, have made reference to EFQM, and I've had this conversation with Stephen, so he knows what's coming. EFQM, I think it's a wonderful tool. I've worked with it previously, and I would recommend it. However, what we're doing is we're being presented here with a number of projects that have all been scored, and yeah, we have the narrative, but nobody here understands how that's been applied. Nobody here understands how it works. And also, I think there would be a benefit for us as members, and I think Stephen has got it in hand that we're going to arrange a seminar in relation to EFQM and quality approaches so that we better understand what it is we're being presented with. So I would recommend that members get along to that if they can. But to pick up on Councillor Scobie's point there, you know, we've got these projects, they've all been scored. What is the point of scoring them if we're just going to acknowledge it and move on? Is it to sort of give us some sort of context as to value, benefit, or what have you? And it really does mean that, is there a cut-off where we no longer support a project, or is there a mechanism whereby we'd look to sort of improve the outcomes for that? Thanks. Sorry, one last thing. Are we going to go through each of these projects individually? Because I do have a comment on one, but if that's the case, then I'll leave it till we come into it. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll go through them. We've noted what you've said there, Andy, but I think we'll get further discussions in the autumn as well on this to make decisions like you're talking about, like the taxi card scheme. Is it really the best scheme when it is £100 not that much? So that's maybe a thing for the next meeting. So we're on page 108, holiday food fund. Just stop me if you would like to come in that. Councillor Jimison. No. he comes in, he'll get another chance at it. Page 113, direct support to our most vulnerable families through social work services, 64,000, total score 20. Fair share memberships for community groups, 56,000, total score 24. Area committee grant funding to tackle poverty and inequalities, £180,000, and that's the subject of another recommendation as well on the amount of that. Summer of Play. Summer of Play 125. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you for letting me in, Chair. Yeah, it says in the evolving measure refining the aims that the project will continue in 2025, reflect comments of members in 2024. You know, can we understand what those changes might be? And is there an opportunity for elected members to feed into locations and venues for such like? Because there has been examples whereby we feel certain members are feeling that that lack of consultation means that we're not perhaps finding the most appropriate place at times.
Yeah, I think these are community driven, most of them as well. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor McFarlane. So, in terms of Summer of Play, the members received a detailed evaluation at this committee at its first meeting on the 2024, when some of the comments that members made at that were in relation to the marketing and promotion specifically to ensure that our children and young people in the region were aware of the opportunities that were there, and as such that has been then put in place for this year's scheme. The grants programme for this year was launched. The scoring panel was on Monday of this week. The committee had previously agreed 4 years ago that the decisions for Summer of Play Fund would be made by the Youth Council, supported by officers, so that young people were making decisions for children and young people. That took place, as I said, on Monday. And there has been grant allocations, which the letters will go out next week, so the organisations are not aware of them yet, but there is organisations funded in every single ward, as there has been since the year one, to provide activities. So the opportunities that are there can only be provided within the specific very local communities where we have organisations who apply for the funding. But over and above that, there is a range of council services who are also funded through it, who provide activity in every ward, and one of the main parts of that is the amazing summer road shows, which takes activities into our very, very small communities to deliver things during the summer. So happy to pick up a conversation with any member if there's feedback, but certainly all the feedback that's been received by members has been incorporated into this year's plan, and all wards will have activity that will be launched in mid-May and promoted within both our primary and secondary schools.
Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thanks for letting me back in, Chair. Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. That's very helpful. And clearly, I think we're getting a bit of a settling down period with this committee. And I think that over time, we will sort of develop a set of norms which will make it a bit more consistent, I think. But just in relation to the feedback, in relation to the structure of the report, this is exactly one of the ones where we were talking about, where the results go on for 4 pages, but most everything else goes on for 1 and a bit. So it means that we end up with lots of columns which are lying empty, and perhaps what we need is just a broadening of the results in order to shorten the length of it, and perhaps that maybe balance it out. I don't know, but it was just a good example of, you know, you turn 4 or 5 pages where you've got lots and lots of empty columns. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Scopey wants to come in as well.
Yeah, Chair, I think this is one that just hit the target in terms of strategy. Because what we got, and we're in a different hat, and Mark knows, I've used some of these initiatives. I think it was Summer Hunger, there was one before that, and there is no doubt that many children and families get great benefit from this, but do we really get to those who are living in poverty? And it's how do we address this in terms of, yes, it's a great project, and there are many organisations throughout the region who will apply and give good reason why they would need it. But are we getting to the people that really need it perhaps we could hear from Mark and Wendy on this one. Just, you know, how effective is this in terms of tackling poverty? And I'm not trying to take away, because it scored 24 points. It's how do we? And again, it would be helpful to have that strategic thinking behind it.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Scobie. When Summer of Play began 4 years ago, it was a Scottish Government initiative that was about, and very clearly about all children and young people without any priority. When the Scottish Government stopped funding that 2 years ago, this council made a decision that Summer of Play was then going to be targeted specifically and only at children and young people who were identified as the priority groups within our child poverty plan, to directly target those children and young people. So I'll give members an example of that. Was in the first 2 years of it, there was funding provided to our colleagues within leisure and sport to provide free access to swimming during the summer holidays for all children and young people. And it was done very much on a first-come, first-served basis. But now what happens is that funding's provided through this, but it's working with our third sector partners and our council services such as social work, who know our families, and working with our schools who know them absolutely the best, to ensure that the vouchers for free swimming is then provided to children who would be deemed as in poverty or experiencing some sort of inequality. So that's just a good example of how we've shifted the policy intent of that to target it. And I appreciate it was last year, but the first meeting of this committee did provide probably a 30-40 page report detailing the outcomes and evaluation of Summer Play. So I'd maybe suggest that would have the detail in it that Councillor Scobie's looking for.
Thank you, and thanks for your scrutiny, Councillor Scobie. Thank you. We've got Councillor Stevenson want to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say I'd welcome a seminar. I appreciate at the last budget we didn't take the summer activity scheme cut, but it was in the budget that passed, which took £80,000 away from disabled children for summer activities that meant so much to them. So it was £50,000, I'm just being told, but yeah, £50,000 is, you know, it's peanuts to us, but it made such a big difference to these kids. So I think that, you know, a seminar would be good going forward. I'm sure everybody done their due diligence and checked their impact assessments on it before it went through, but yeah, definitely something that's needed.
Thanks, Councillor Stevens. I think we've had that debate at budget time, so we'll move on to additional holiday food fund payments, £220,000, total score 22. I think we can all agree that's a really important part to alleviate the effects of and tackle poverty. So, anybody want in that one? Pardon?
Scottish Government, are they still funding this? Are they withdrawn? It's on page 130. Scotland providing funding in 24-25, and it was agreed that the top-up, that we would top that up. Are we topping it up to the figure of the Scottish Government, or are we still getting funding from the Scottish Government?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Scobie. Yeah, the Scottish Government still fund it in part, and our council tops up to ensure that all children and young people can access it that require it.
On to page 134, Emergency Energy Payment Assistance Programme, £100,000, and I think that's crucial because in times of huge increases in energy payments, so I think that one speaks for itself.
Sorry, you missed the period one and 132.
Okay. You want to speak to that one? Right. The 132. Free period products. It's not an intentional omission, so it's vital as well. Yeah, and Councillor Little highlighted the need for these at a previous council meeting. 138, welfare and housing options.
134. And it was just the presentation made by Circa, what was the one? Lemonade. And recognising that anyone who is has, what is the figure, 10% of disposable income, then if you don't have that, then you are in fuel poverty. And I think that Lemonade made the point that he was only at the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. So in this respect, we've got £100,000. And again, it's to look at that in terms of the strategic thinking. Are we getting anywhere near to people living in fuel poverty with that figure?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the £100,000, we work with the registered social landlords and also with Citizens Advice Service around the distribution of that. In the last financial year, the funding from the RSLs was fully utilised within the first half of the year, which it just as we entered winter. So that shows you a challenge around that budget in terms of the demand that comes with it. However, the budget that Citizens Advice were allocated for private people who've got private tenancies lasted the full year. So in terms of the demand that was there from RSLs was significantly more than the private rented sector, which is allowing us to move any of the budget from the private rented sector over to the RSL sector. But a number of the RSLs have also used that funding to lever in additional funding from elsewhere as well, which allowed them to continue the programmes throughout the full financial year.
Picking up a theme from what you're saying, Councillor Scobie, is that you think that some of the amounts of money we spend is unrealistic and doesn't meet needs. Is that what the theme you were?
Yeah, notwithstanding what Mark's just told us in terms of the private sector and the socially rented sector, then most of it's used in the socially rented sector, and indeed only lasted the 6 months. So it's really just to get more detail on this one. In terms of, are we putting enough aside to tackle fuel poverty? Is it that perhaps the private sector don't know about it, that where do they apply, and so forth and so on, but it's to get a handle on that and whether that 100,000 is anywhere near tackling fuel poverty. That we know you're in fuel poverty if it's 10% of your disposable income that you don't have it.
So is it possible when we bring back the next report that we comment on these things like the viability of the budgets, whether they're sufficient and what we need to make them more realistic? Obviously, as subject, we can't obviously allocate that, but it can be taken forward by members.
If I may, Chair, fully understand Councillor Scobie's point, and when we're speaking about tackling poverty in particular, it's something that, in terms of alleviating poverty in Dumfries and Galloway, it's beyond the realistic scope of this council to utilise its funding to do that, just because of the worldwide issues as well as the national and local issues. So I know that's not what you're saying in terms of, is it enough? I think the short answer is like £100,000 is being well utilised. It's levering more money into the region to assist people who are most at risk of fuel poverty. So it's money that's excellently well spent, and you could easily argue that you want to spend more there. I think, though, that's back to that kind of strategic debate in terms of where does every pound that we spend make the biggest impact. So we heard earlier from our Citizens Advice colleagues, you know, £1 gets us £27 benefit in one area, 26 elsewhere, combination of. So that's the kind of thing that I think you need to look at. So it's really helpful to go through these one by one, and it is an excellent report, as has already been highlighted by members. But it's having that strategic conversation when we can take that umbrella approach above that to see, you know, this is the amount of money we have as a council. Where's it best spent to address poverty? And it's not just poverty, obviously. This committee is about inequalities and housing as well. So just aware of that, if that's helpful.
And to the point that Stephen's making there, you know, it's how do we measure success? And I think it was Lemonade that said we could give out a card, an energy card, and that'll get them by. Some of that money was taken away. in terms of what they owed. So they only got about, was it 60p or something, he had a percentage. But it's really to measure, you know, how successful we're being, notwithstanding again that we'll never have enough money to tackle what indeed is poverty in our region, but it's where we are tackling it most effectively, and what's the measurement against that on some of these projects. How do we measure success?
Thanks, Councillor Scobie. On to welfare and housing options, page 138, 165,000, total score 24. Another high scoring project that really makes an impact. And page 141, additional funding for the Scottish Welfare Fund, which is one of our bigger items, £395,000, total score 24. Any questions on that one? On to 144, grassroots tackling poverty projects, £40,000, total score 18. Anything on that one? Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I appreciate we've got a system in place here. I mean, all the scores are what you would probably consider to be in the normal, okay, in terms of what people are doing here. It seems a bit unfortunate somebody's at the bottom of the league here when they're actually very small local projects. So I think there's something missing here in the way we capture these, because the impact of £2,000 or £3,000 on a small village community might be huge compared to 20 or 30,000 in a big area. So is there a way that we can ask Mark and Wendy to take away and to kind of look at the scoring system a wee bit? We did that when it came to SIMD about rural poverty, because we were always using the urban figures. And once we did that, and we had CPAG did a presentation for us a few councils ago now, and that really opened the eyes of councillors, you and I amongst us, Dick, you know, that poverty wasn't something that happened in Stranraer, it wasn't happened in Partiana, and it happened in North West Dumfries or Upper Nithsdale, it happened right across the whole community. And we adjusted how we scored SIMD in the back of that. Is there a way we can actually do this, to tweak it a wee bit, to take into account for very small projects in a very localised area that might be making a huge impact in that area, but didn't score as well because of the criteria that we use to score? Does that make sense?
Mark?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. I can certainly take back and have further discussions with colleagues within the business improvement team who have led this evaluation. What they've told us is that using the EFQM framework was the most robust approach to this, but I absolutely take on board his comments around the nuance of that with the projects, and this was never ever designed to create a league table to suggest those at the bottom were you know, not making a difference to individuals or communities, because they are, we know that they all are, but previously members did ask for this has gone back to Communities Committee, did ask for an evaluation using a framework that allowed them to measure one project against another, and this is what we brought 2 years in a row to the Communities Committee, and then has followed on to this committee, because that's what members had asked for, because prior to that, and Councillor Ferguson will maybe remember this to his time as Chair of Communities Committee, that prior to that it was a lot more nuanced, but what it did, the feedback from members at that point when I took on the remit for tackling poverty was that they felt that it didn't allow them to compare projects. So I think, you know, I'll take on board and go back to colleagues in the business improvement team and look and see what we, you know, how we can do that. And what we've tried to balance with, as well as within another appendix in the report, is provide case studies, so that it's not just data, so you can see the impact on individuals and communities. So every project funded in 23, 24, 25 that's outlined in here and evaluated also as a case study in here for members to see the real life impact of the projects, because again members had asked for that previously.
Yeah, just to build on what Andy was saying there in terms of the poverty stretches right across, not just, you know, and at that time it was recognised under urban aid, that Dixhill and North West Dumfries were the only ones that could apply for that one, and we did for years try to get in socially, you know, and we weren't successful in that. But in this one, and I'm sure Wendy could elaborate on this one, my understanding is that this is about giving out free uniforms on people recycling the uniform, but it extends to actually kids getting their hair done, their hair cut and different things as well. So it's that dignity and respect that you know, coming into equality and everything else, that, you know, it may be only a few numbers. This is where the strategic thinking comes in, because this will, in some kid going, at least they've got a uniform if the school operates on uniforms. But that kid doesn't stand out. So it's that respect and that dignity that may have adjusted that score. I just wonder if there's an opportunity there to look at that.
Yeah, I think there is there. So thanks, Councillor Ferguson and Scobie, for your important contributions there, because good points made there. The Director, Mr. Morgan, people used to taught at Anne Academy for a long time, and still I get pupils who have taught, and they're now in their 60s, their mid-60s, and they say, "Hello, Mr. Brody," so they still say, "Call me Richard." So yeah, so the Director has pointed out a phrase on page 144 in the right-hand column. We will be embedding more sensitive poverty indicator tracking, which provides more measurability through these projects. So that maybe is what you're referring to, Councillor Ferguson. We're on to direct individual payments, 148, to most vulnerable young people through youth work, £40,000. Total score, £21. And these small amounts of funding really are important to young people. Any questions on that one? Next one is 152, support to tackle poverty reference group, £10,000, and that's to support that reference group's work. It's a small amount of money, but I think it's an important contribution to our work. Any questions on that one? No? Okay, I think we'll have done recommendation, review and scrutinise the overall outcomes and evaluation of each policy investment fund. And the second one is to note the case studies for each of the projects as detailed in 4.1 and in Appendix 2. Does anybody want to refer to the case studies in there? I think they give a highlight of the good work that's going on to tackle poverty. So we can maybe note the case studies. Councillor Marshall.
Morning, Mr. Brodie. I'm one of your former pupils.
Mr. Marshall is one of my favourite pupils.
Page 168, 169, 170. I have made a statement of connection with regards to New Start, but it was really just to the fact that it's been highlighted as a case study shows the value of a range of services that it provides. And it originally started just with furniture, etc., but it extended its services out so that I think we had excellent presentations from similar groups in Stranraer and Dumfries at communities last year, and you know, they were excellent presentations. One thing that struck me, and I said at the time, was both of those have quite a lot of employed staff, and the concern is that if you look at the very last paragraph on page 170, the two main directors are hands-on. They're volunteers as well, so it's maybe not made clear in there, but there's no one paid on a New Start. And they won't mind me saying as well, they're both, one's in their 60s, one's in their 70s, they both had health issues. And it's really worrying, you know, they've flagged up that if one of them or both of them was no longer involved, I think the project would probably collapse, and that would result in the council having to intervene and trying to provide some of these services either directly or indirectly through another organisation. So it's really just a plea, and I know they work very closely with Wendy, but it's just a plea to look at how they can be more sustainable, because at the moment, if it was to shut, I don't think we would be able to reopen that. So it's really just a plea to kind of for the council to work with them to ensure they have a sustainable model going forward, because it provides loads of valuable services right across Andale and Eskdale. So it's really just to make that plea.
Wendy?
Great, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just busy writing. So thank you, Councillor Marshall. The New Start Recycle project does an amazing job, and they cover a huge range of services now. And you're right, Councillor Marshall, in terms of the original concept was it actually took over the Annan Can Bank and then developed from that project onwards. With funding from one of the early policy development funding allocations when Harry and myself took over the poverty and inequalities budget, so it was one of the first projects we started. But I do know that they are struggling to get support, to get funding in, and any support that we could give. We've referred them on to Third Sector, Dumfries and Galloway, plus other support providers, and we've given them details of all funders who would possibly be able to help. I think as well, as in other organisations throughout the region, they're so busy delivering the services that it's such a struggle to actually sit down and do the funding application. So if we were able to offer any additional help and support, that would be really welcome by the team, but they do an exceptional job. And I think just with a little of additional support from some of the council teams and also Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway, they would be able to secure the vital funding that they need at this point. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Wendy.
Okay. I've got Councillor Jimison wanting to come in.
Thank you, Richard. I'm referring to page 159 and 160, opportunities for improvement. On question 2 on page 159, it mentions or refers to the need for measurability, and it specifically suggests we look at the difference between what our initiatives are. Are they mitigation or are they directed at undoing the cause? Both are equally important. We've talked a lot about mitigation. I think all of our meetings have been talking about largely mitigation. But my interest is beyond mitigation, notwithstanding that we need the mitigation, but how do we undo the causes of poverty, inequality and housing? So I'm impressed by Harry's comments and looking at outcomes, how we can be more collaborative, and also suggestion of a seminar. What I would like is these seminars, but particularly looking at the long term, taking people out of poverty through inequalities and poor housing. What are the long term things we can do? And as a suggestion, probably our next agenda, I would propose that we have the council services and any additional services that can give us an idea of what we can do to improve the outcomes. So this would be social works, family liaison, early learning, schools right from primary through to secondary. Look at now that we've got the employability, skills and community well-being, we've got Harry's team, because Lynn Burgess, which looks at the employability, skills and opportunity. And also we have things like organisations such as Developing the Young Workforce, Skills Development Scotland. I hasten to add, it's not just about young people having the skills and the qualities and the exam results, etc., but also adult learning. The best way, and all the research tells us this, the best way to take people out of poverty is get them into gainful employment through education and support post-education. So I would really like to focus on the long-term ambitions to take people out of poverty. What are we doing, what we can do better? And probably it's an opportunity to do something that may not cost extra money, it just means that we do things better. So that would be my suggestion, either a seminar or preferably, and we have on our next agenda a real good look at what we're doing to take people out of poverty through increasing their ability to get gainful employment. Thank you.
Okay, is it something we could include in the seminar? Yeah. We've got agreement that can be included, Councillor Jimison.
Can we also consider, we've not touched on this very much at all, and one of the reasons we set this group up, certainly our ambition in the SNP group, was to look at how the services within the council and the private sector and the likes of skills development. How can we help our young people and job changers get long-term escape from the impact of poverty? We've touched on a lot of history. Let's look forward, please. So I'd really like us to focus an upcoming meeting on what we can do that takes people out of poverty sustainably.
That can be taken into consideration of future agenda as well.
Thank you.
Okay. So, can we note the case? We've got Councillor Ferguson again. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for letting me back in, Chair. Just a couple of things here. On page 94, it actually gives us some of the rationale as to why Appendix 3 changes are there. But it's not very clear as to why we've actually increased some area allocation, reduced other area allocations. I mean, I'd love to think it was a reduced in poverty in my ward, but I can't see why that's the case. So what was the rationale for reducing that or to change in the allocation percentages? And then the second thing is, that's a straightforward question, I suppose. The second thing here is, we've been talking a lot today about how we work with each other people and everything else. It'd be really good if this subcommittee could meet the Tackling Poverty Reference Group. Yes, absolutely. So whether that's a conjoined meeting or whether that's around the table, like some form of informal get-together, because I was involved in the early days. It's when they used to bring the biscuits and facilitate the whole meetings there. They came for coffee and biscuits sometimes, you know, because it was the only food they had to eat that day. That was the reality at the time. And so how can we do that in an informal setting to get the members of this subcommittee to meet the reference group? If they want to, right, that's the first proviso. We need to ask them first if it was okay. Because they're still all volunteers, I think, aren't they? Yeah. So, and they're all with lived experience, yeah. So we need to be really careful how we manage that whole situation. But I think it's time that the councillors actually got to meet the people who are actually doing a lot of this work for us free of charge behind the scenes.
Okay, thanks. There's two ones. There's the formula. We'll take that one first, and then also how we can interface with the poverty reference group.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's good comments from Councillor Ferguson. Wendy will take us through the rationale and the formula details, because she's done the good work in that's based on the recommendations. But in terms of the Tackling Poverty Reference Group, I think it was within the plan for the second half of the year for this group to work with the TPRG volunteers. I attend their meetings regularly, and we did discussion with them, and I don't think this is the right format in a formal committee meeting as you're suggesting, Councillor Ferguson. So I think what I could do is take back and work with Jeanette Byers, who's the chair of the group, and discuss at their next meeting how would be the best way to facilitate that in an informal way that's right for those volunteers. And I'd suggest that's probably within a community venue, and then we can put the arrangements in place for that and invite members of this committee to do that, and I'll do that through the director and the chair to do that, and I'll hand over to Wendy, chair, if that's okay, to take us through the changes to the formula.
Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. Councillor Ferguson, thank you for your question. It's a really good question. So in relation to the new proposed area formula, what we've done is we've taken local statistics to piece together the relevant poverty data for this, to make sure that we're using only data that we know is absolutely perfect, that's received from our Dumfries and Galloway Council colleagues. So the formula that we're using now, and which was first changed in June 2019, consists of the ward boundary details for the homeless applications, percentage of council tax reduction properties, percentage of free school meals and school clothing grants, and percentage of crisis and community care grants. So it's based on the figures for each of the ward boundary areas for each of those distinct sort of grant funding that's allocated by Dumfries and Galloway Council. So those formulas then give us the overall percentage area allocation. So because those changes happen each month in terms of, and each year in terms of the number of, for example, crisis and community care grant applications within each ward boundary area, the figures will constantly change. So although some areas might lose and some areas might gain, if we're doing it on a regular basis, it will highlight which areas have the highest levels of poverty and which would receive the highest levels of allocations of the area committee funding for that year. So it's based on the levels of poverty within each of the ward areas, and it was found to be a really good representation in terms of the poverty figures at that point. So sometimes some areas will lose, some areas will win, but it does balance out in terms of the overall region.
Yeah, Councillor Ferguson, yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much. Right, I see Jamie sitting at the back of the room for the next item. So that will include the migration as old unfit houses are getting knocked down and people are moving to other wards and other areas. So that is that one of the factors that you've got factored in now? Because I'm thinking in Pollinize ward, for example, there's at least half a dozen big blocks of flats, for example, that are actually no longer there. A significant number of people have moved out of the ward. So is that the reason why North West Dumfries is coming, its allocation is coming down, for example, rather than you know, or is there another reason? Because if that's one of the reasons, then we've got a problem, because then we're going to have even less people up there. And it's going to lead us down the track that we're actually making progress. And we're winning the fight against poverty, where we know that all the signs are it's getting worse as days go by. So it affects the current people, you know, more and more and more, and it will continue to do that. It will escalate as this goes through. So it just, you know, if we take that into account, I think there's some other areas who've had houses emptied as well, not just in my ward, but it'd be interesting if that's been part of the process.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just come in the back of that. Just in terms of the formula that's in front of members is the one that was previously agreed at Communities Committee across 6 different categories, if you like, and data sets. So what we're asking today is for members just to use the most up-to-date data to apply the formula that was previously agreed at committee. But by default of using the current formula, it does take into account the demographic changes and the people moving out of house areas, which then sometimes is then resulting in some of the wards that would maybe be perceived or in reality have some of the highest levels of deprivation, then reducing because it's based on the population figures that's there. But within Appendix D, it outlines what the data sets are that are using that, and what I would say generally is that this is a reasonably small percentage changes, if you look, and that's why I put in the report the table to actually show you what the change looks like, and you know, in 4.21 in terms of the final column, where it's actually showing you what it looks like in terms of the actual allocation of the 180,000 for the current year. But it is absolutely using the up-to-date data as of the 31st of March.
Thanks. Because it's a double-sided coin, isn't it? Yeah, because whilst the numbers in Pollinize ward might be reducing, they're going to be adding in Lochar ward, for example, where there's a significant number being moved to, or wherever else it is. So we're going to have to pay really close attention to that, because that migration, and as that whole rebuilding programme continues, there's got to be a migration back and forward all the time, and it could skew the figures, to be fair. So we're going to have to keep a very close eye on it, I would suggest, Chair.
I think we're committed to regular reviews of it, so that we don't. Obviously, if you leave it for a number of years, then you're going to get lots of. It's going to be skewed a lot. So I think this is a really reasonable way forward on it. Anybody else want to come in? So I think we've noted the case studies for each of the projects as detailed in 4.1 and Appendix 2. I think we've noted our Council's work to tackle poverty and inequalities is fully included the Poverty and Inequalities Partnership Action Plans to maximise the impact and outcomes as detailed in 4.12 to 4.14. So we're happy to note that one. And 4, we just discussed it, agree to apply up-to-date data for the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Area Committee grants for 2025-26 as detailed in 4.15 to 4.23 and Appendix 3. And as Councillor Ferguson said, we'll keep a close eye on it. Happy to agree that one? Yeah. And agree to receive a report later in 2025 on the future approach to funding for projects that tackle poverty and inequalities, including the co-funding of projects using the existing revenue budget, which progresses as the agreed full council motion as detailed in 4.24 to 4.3. Are you happy to agree that one? Yeah. And as an action or a recommendation that we hold the seminar as outlined by the director. Yeah.
Chair.
You need to, yeah.
Chair, yeah, I want to come in on this one, and I've heard some of the other members, Councillor Scobie, etc., coming in. I really just wanted to say, I understand the report, and then, you know, at 4.27, I think it's absolutely right that it states in the last sentence that it's about looking at options to co-fund some of these projects on an ongoing recurring basis from 2026-27 using the 630,000 core revenue budget allocated to tackle poverty. No problem with that, but I think we are going to be faced when we take a decision on all these projects. It'll be a little bit of a bun fight, and there'll be, I don't think all of them will want to actually look for core funding, but I think it's realistic to expect that more of the projects we would want to see core funded than the 630 currently available. And I think the at 4.3, it does actually flag up the fact that, you know, any decisions on additional core funding of projects will have to be done through the budget deliberations. The only problem I've got with that is that, and I think it's unanimous amongst this whole committee, that we want to see more of these projects core funded, and we want to see an increase in the level of core funding within that. And sometimes I think, you know, why do we have to wait to the budget process when all groups are unanimously in favour of it? And I think it's something that we need to discuss at the seminar. But I'm right in saying that, you know, basically this committee doesn't have any budget, so it's about referrals to other service committees. But I don't think there's anything to stop us actually sending a strong message that we want consideration taken of when savings are identified. Because one of the issues that the Labour group had with the budget this year was the amount of vacancies that were held back until the end of the year and formed a template in the budget. So, you know, there is savings ongoing that council will identify within the service committees, and it's just, we would probably, I'm not speaking on behalf of this committee, but we would like to see some consideration made to increasing the core funding within that. Now, the way we do that, we can discuss at the seminar, but I think it's the will of this committee that we want to see more core funding for this, especially for projects that have been done year in, year out, are consolidated, and we see a future for these going forward.
Thanks, Councillor Marshall. That'll certainly be on the agenda for the next meeting when we make our recommendations on the core funding. So I think, yeah, we're all committed to support as many projects as possible, and we will have an opportunity to discuss those again at the next meeting. So thank you very much for your contribution.
And the seminar, Chair, it's about looking at ways, if we have an over surplus of projects that when we come to the next meeting that we are wanting to core fund, it's looking at ways of how we can actually achieve that out with the budget process, because I think it's a bit, it ends up again with, you know, us all having to put into separate budgets. But if there's other ways, and I'm sure there's other ways of actually making that point, that we could achieve additional core funding out with the budget process. And if, you know, maybe seek governance advice on that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the governance advice being sought was. Sorry, Chair.
It's about actually increasing the core funding for the projects that are considered under tackling poverty out with the budget process. So either through identification of savings on an ongoing basis through the service committees.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I think you as members can come to a collective agreement as you have recently around things, but it does absolutely have to be part of the budget setting process. I think the seminar suggested is to look at what your strategic priorities are in relation to tackling poverty, inequality and homelessness. And if you as a committee deem that more funding or less funding or the same funding is required to cover all bases, then that's what you would put into as a cross-party agreement if that's where you get to the budget setting process and taking through leaders panel and budget panel. I don't think you can distract from the ordinary governance that we have, but that ability for you to suggest something new and different in a budget is absolutely there as part of that process. And I think the seminar where you can get into the detail of what you want to set as your strategic priorities for this committee and the funding that would sit alongside that is absolutely appropriate and gives you the way to look at that, set out what that is, and then instruct us as officers to present that as a formal report for this committee to be passed on to the full council or wherever.
Yeah, and I think Stephen, you've kind of summed up what I was wanting to say. I think it's about actually this committee requesting a budget template, and that has the strength and weight of a full committee actually requesting a budget template under the the budget consideration.
I think so. There's all sorts of opportunities for cross-party working on our strategy for tackling poverty and inequalities in housing. Right, members' hands, but we've got 2 more items to do. Are you happy to proceed and before we for lunch? Yeah. Okay. So we're on to item 6, the Dumfries and Galloway Council's local housing strategy report by Head of Economy and Environment. This provides members with an update on what to produce the next LHS. For Dumfries and Galloway, it also highlights the significant consultation undertaken to date and sets out next steps ahead of presentation to full council. In addition, the report seeks members' endorsement for the vision and priorities that have been developed in collaboration with key stakeholders. Jamie Little is here to assist members if you have any questions, and I'll open the meeting to member debate.
Yeah, I welcome the report, and it starts to address some of the housing issues that we are facing and the huge shortage, particularly in the larger properties, the 3, 4, 5 bedroom properties, in terms of giving direction on that through the strategy. I just wonder in terms of 191 under 4.2.2, Jamie, in terms of, and it's been said in right care, right place, trying to access from registered social landlords, places that we haven't so far secured. That's for another day. I'm sure when I could meet with Stephen. But it's around the whole issue of the care village, and it was referenced, I think, at the social work. And this goes back many, many years ago when Graham Foster and I took forward that we had a private sector person that was looking to develop that care village. It was a new concept, it was a new initiative, and it's something that came out of Holland. And indeed, the principal, as I understand it, at the university, the Western Scotland University, actually took a sabbatical to go over and look at it. I just wonder how far we are actually developing this concept, so that we can look at this as a potential to start to tackle some of the issues that we got in social care.
Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Scobie. So the care village model is something that is one of the many options that we're currently looking at. And it's something that has potential to cover a lot of the issues that we're experiencing in the housing sector. We know that the delivery of aids and adaptations budgets is becoming incredibly challenging. We also know that our population is ageing and they're doing so less healthily, unfortunately. So we are working very closely with the NHS and the Adult Health and Social Care Partnership to make sure that the right housing developments can be brought forward. And similar models to the sort of care village principle have been adopted in Dumfries and Galloway so far. They've predominantly been aimed at people with learning disabilities and delivered through the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. But we are widening out the scope within our engagement with the Adult Health and Social Care Partnership, trying to ensure that they are really able to support and enable the development of these housing projects, because we know there's a significant opportunity there, and what we're looking for from their side is strategic direction and demand information around what's going to be the most important objectives for them. I can say the NHS and the Adult Health and Social Care Partnership have played a significant part in the development of the local housing strategy to date, and are key members of our local housing strategy officer working group as well.
Yeah, welcome what James is saying there, that there is discussions going on, but I often wonder when we look at Fife, and Fife, as I understand, have 4 care villages, and throughout this whole discussion, that we're really missing an opportunity. So while the discussions are welcomed and helpful, it's really to see how do we move it forward till we get to the same point where Fife is at, just taking that as an example, and that we have a report to say, you know, what's a reasonable timescale for, you know, all the talks to come to some fruition, and that we have a report before us. So, you know, it's not just ended up talking amongst each other, but that there's something tangible and could manifestly deliver on that whole concept.
Councillor Morgan. Steve Morgan.
I'm worrying what I might be called next if I ask to input into today's committee again, Chair. No, Jamie's absolutely right in terms of the collaboration in relation to Health Board, Health and Social Care Partnership, which obviously involves social work as well, around developing the strategic housing improvement plan, etc. And a care village is one of many options, as Jamie said, and what we're currently doing around the visioning work for adult social work and social care is looking at a whole range of options, which, for example, might include a recommendation at some point in the future around whether or not the council builds its own care homes, and what would those care homes look like, so it's not part of the current estate in a model of delivery. That's the same part of the work that Jamie's doing, and sorry Jamie if I'm talking for you, is looking at our new schemes and the amenity that's there and the intergenerational ongoing kind of living that's possible, and the flow of communities, etc. So all of these things are being considered. I would hate, though, no disrespect to Fife intended at all, but I would hate to compare us with other areas who have a different starting point, a different demographic, etc. So we've got to try and get what's absolutely best for us. And these conversations are active and they're robust. Progress might sometimes seem slow, but it's because we're dealing with lots of different complex matters in complex systems, and it's trying to get that in a stepped manner to a stage where we would need to get to. And I think the work that Jamie leads on is excellent, and it's helping us get, you know, the strategic planning in the right place to have delivery following on from that. So Jamie, apologies if I've cut across anything that you would have been saying.
Yeah, just on the point and comparisons, and Jamie will maybe be able to correct me, but I think Fife still has control of its council housing stock and the budget for that, whereas we don't. You know, we rely on partners, so I don't think we're comparing, you know, apples for apples.
Chair, I wonder if I get back. That was only an example. I didn't say that I'm comparing Dumfries and Galloway with Fife, but Fife may have gone through all the discussions and moved forward. And it's, you know, as Stephen's saying there, progress may seem slow, but if it's, you know, in another place, and all these discussions are taking place, there's got to be a time when it's the end of the discussions and then it comes back to the subcommittee. Just in terms of right care, right place, where I discovered there's another group meeting and discussing without actually coming back to parent bodies. So it's the progress of that, of those discussions, all the issues, and there's another one thrown into the pot, build our own care homes. You know, when they externalised the care homes in about the late 90s, there was a degree of opposition to that. And I was in the Labour group at the time. We said it was the wrong move, and I think we've been proven that it's been the wrong move, in my opinion. So, no, I wasn't. It was an independent. We'll have that discussion somewhere else, Andy. But what I'm saying is that there must be a time when all these discussions on all the options and what's right for Dumfries and Galloway comes back to us as the elected member. That's what I'm saying. And it's that time scale. So that, you know, it's not just some, now we're talking about that. We're talking, you know, we could be blue in the face by that time. So it's really to come back with, is it an issue? Is there a demand? And how do we tackle that demand alongside the others that's in the report, Jamie?
Stephen.
Yeah, Councillor Scobie, you're absolutely right. And on Monday of this week, myself and Nicole, the Chief Officer for the Health and Social Care Partnership, did go around political groups having a discussion around this issue. And unfortunately, because of circumstances, we couldn't meet with yourselves, but we'll rearrange that as a matter of priority.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you want to add, Jamie? Yeah, how with that, with the responses?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to say, you know, as we come back to full council, which will be the body that has the overall sign-off for the local housing strategy, we'll set out an action plan at that point as well. The report in front of members here today is really to look at the vision and principles that we're working with. We're working very intensely right now around the development of the action plan, and the action plan will also be supported by those timelines that Councillor Scobie is referring to.
We'll move to the recommendations now. 1. Note the update on the local housing strategy, including the consultation work carried out to date. Happy to note. 2. Note the next steps in the development of local housing strategy, including timeline for reporting to full council. Happy to note. And 3. Endorse the local housing strategy vision and priorities. Are we all happy to endorse the local housing strategy visions and priorities? And thank Jamie for his continuing very good work on that one. Okay, we're on to 7, Energy Efficient Scotland Area-Based Scheme 2025-6, report by Head of Economy and Environment. This report asks elected members to agree that Energy Efficient Scotland Area-Based Scheme ABS 25-6 projects for Dumfries and Galloway, and to note the latest delivery position for ongoing 2024-25 projects. Furthermore, the report provides an update on the investment leveraged into the region via the local authority Eco4 Flex scheme. At the time of writing, the funding allocation for the coming year from the Scottish Government has not been received. However, it is anticipated by the end of April, and verbal confirmation will be provided to members during the meeting with a copy of the letter circulated at the earliest opportunity. Jamie's here again to assist members. And take it we've not received the money yet since that report was right.
No letter yet, unfortunately. It has been slightly delayed, but we're hoping to get that as soon as possible. And as I said, I will share that around all members of the committee as soon as we do receive that letter. I do feel we can still progress with the committee's decision-making process today, setting out the priorities we want to deliver in 25-26. The expectation is that we will have a very similar sum to the amount received in 24-25, given that we're aware that the national budget has not changed in any shape or form.
Thank you. I'll open up the members' debate. Any questions for Jamie on this one? No? So I think we can move to the recommendation on this one. Note the delivery of the local authority.
Chair.
Oh, I said you were one of my favourite people, Sean Marshall. I'm changing my mind now. Go on then.
that must be measured about on how many times you give me the bell. Just, Jamie, just a quick question. Energy efficiency Scotland area-based schemes. Just, we're targeting, you know, the addresses in Lockfield, Summerhill, Eastriggs and Lochside. Do you know when we'll be in a position to kind of state, you know, how many of those have accepted or are being done, and will that be reported to a separate committee? And just a general point on that, because I know when we actually tried to kind of promote that in Eastriggs, a lot of people kind of thought it was a bit of a scam or something like that, and I had quite a few inquiries, and I had to reassure them. So it was just about, and I think I've raised it before, about how we better communicate the schemes when they come into these areas, because it's a valuable piece of work that's been done on these properties. So just a couple of points.
So better communications.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Marshall. So within the report, we have highlighted delivery of the scheme for 24-25 to date. Certainly happy to keep members up to speed in terms of delivery and sign up from customers within each of these areas. We can do that through reporting to this committee or any other means that would be suitable for members. The report does set out the number of addresses that we will be targeting. And unfortunately, some people do not choose to sign up to the scheme. That can be for a number of different reasons, but we always work as proactively as possible to try and achieve a high rate of sign-up, because it's fundamental to delivery of the scheme. As you mentioned, some people may see the letters that go out to them initially as potentially a scam, but we do include council logo on there to try and provide some reassurance. The Energy Agency also hold consultation events in many of the areas, just again to try and highlight that this is a legitimate and funded scheme, and the offer on the table is as expected. It is challenging, it is a concern, and what we do also find quite often is that once works commence, that people do then come back for follow up on their original inquiry letter. But we do have very robust processes in place to make sure we're still capturing and supporting those people as much as possible. What I'll do though is I'll take away an action to have a look at how we promote the scheme in these areas in a further way, just to try and make sure we're improving that sign-up rate as much as possible.
Yeah.
A result there, Councillor Marshall?
Yeah, and to quickly come back, probably an email just would be sufficient rather than actually incorporating a report, whatever is the easiest. And I think when you aren't successful with the number of the targeted addresses, am I right in saying as well, you do try and promote that wider for a cost, so that, you know, if the work is being done, that, you know, other kind of homeowners, etc., can take up that opportunity?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Marshall. So yeah, effectively, any of the sites that we're looking for members to include today, they're treated almost as a satellite location. So if individual properties do come forward, which is particularly important in this rural region, that we can still look to support them. You'll be familiar with some of the challenges we've had down in Eastriggs in the delivery of the project in the last financial year, and we've had to mobilise some new projects very swiftly, which has been successful. But we are in constant engagement with the Energy Agency to ensure that the projects can be delivered to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Jamie, and I appreciate the updates you've been given on the Eastriggs issue.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so the three recommendations, we agreed to note 1 and 2 and agree number 3. Are we happy with that? And we've got an action point on communication, promoting the schemes which Jamie Little has agreed to take forward as an action. So item 8 is any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to the need for decision. There are none. I would just like to say what a pleasure it was today to chair the committee, to see people from across parties working together in this our important mission. So thank you very much for that attending.
Thanks, Chair.